than people. Cars have a right to pollute, to make noise. They take up way too much space in highways. We spend way too much on interchanges. We don't spend money on people. We spend money on cars. And if an alien race was watching us, I would be sure that they would think that cars have absolute control over human beings' brain. I've seen people build houses for cars. I've seen people go to the ends of the earth to find oil and gas to feed those cars. I've seen people that'll wash their car every day and work. They go to work just so they can afford gasoline to drive their stupid car to work. You know, what's the sense? You know, and it's the cars that are destroying our urban areas. They're destroying our brains. Air pollution makes people ignorant, causes diseases. What human would be allowed to do that? You know, it's just total insanity. Our love of cars. You know, I'm sure people love their cars more than their wives or their children. You know, and why can't we, instead of building little houses for our cars, build houses for the homeless? Instead of going to the ends of the earth to find gas and oil, why don't we just grow more food so we could feed everybody? Instead, how many people are starving? You know, and it's all because of cars. They take up so much space. Parking, roads, everything is all dependent on us feeding our cars. I would say 80% of all jobs are car related. And I would also venture to say that if we got rid of all cars, 80% of us could have freedom and leisure.
That is very interesting. I'm just going to introduce you a little bit.
Okay.
Because you are from Canada?
Yeah.
So you're born in Canada.
Yes.
Can you explain me again? I know your story, but to record your story, you know.
Okay, I was definitely born on a farm, and I was raised as a farmer, and I know how to raise animals. I even say that animals are a curse on the earth. Domesticated animals are a curse on the earth. After being on a farm and seeing how much fuel it takes to make 1 pound of beef, it probably takes 2 gallons per pound of fuel to bring that pound of beef to your table. I also know that if you take the entire weight of all the animals on the planet, 5% would be wild animals. The rest is humans and domesticated animals. And it's a fact that domesticated animals outweigh humans. So, do we need to eat animals? Absolutely not. We are totally dependent on plants. Plants could live without us. We can't live without plants. And feeding these domesticated animals human food is insane. They are clearing jungles in the Amazon to grow soybean. And that soybean is going to Europe to feed animals, pigs, cows, chickens. It takes 10 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of meat. And if you were a woman with kids to feed for the next week, and you had a choice, 10 pounds of grain or 1 pound of meat, what are you going to choose? It's insane that we have animals. But not only that, the methane coming from cows is probably 30 to 35% of the damaging atmosphere heating. It heats up the planet. 35% of the pollution going into the atmosphere from methane pooping cows and chickens and pigs, it's making up 30% of the global warming that's happening today. So what are we doing? You know, it's like we're doing everything we can to kill off our own species. It just doesn't make sense. And I also, to all you meat eaters, I gotta say that meat tastes awful. You cannot, without salt or pepper, you cannot eat meat. It tastes so bad. People watch a person eating meat. They can only chew it once or twice, and then they stop because it tastes so bad they swallow it. So you're eating something that's destroying human beings, destroying the planet, and it doesn't even taste good. You know, but when has humans ever done something smart in the last 100 years? You know, I don't think we've done anything smart enough to save our species. You know, sure, you think you can find another planet to exploit? You're never going to find it. Because it takes so long to get anywhere. You're never going to find wormholes or warp speed or nothing. You can't go fast in space. The molecules will rip you apart. You think there's no molecules in space? Of course there are. Is there radiation? Of course there is. It will go right through a spacecraft and rip you apart at light speed. And there's no way you're going to get anywhere without light speed. You either protect this planet or you're finished. And I just don't know how to explain it better. Trees, plants, they are going to save us, but we can't stop killing them. Again.
Yeah, and I take advantage of what you just said, and I just wanted you to explain me a little bit. Again, it's a part that I know, but I would like you to explain me your ancestors. So originally, your grandparents, they are coming from.
Yes, they came from the Ukraine as children to Canada to escape tyranny, but it was a fiefdom where peasants had no land. They had to work for the landowners. There was no future. You couldn't even pick wood out of a forest because somebody owned the forest. There was no money, there was nothing. There, all you had is a little house and a garden, if you're lucky, and you had to survive.
We are speaking about what year, more or less?
My grandparents came as children in between 1905 and 1915. There was a lot of immigrants moving into Canada in that time. And the reason they came, because they were offered land, free land. And that was something totally unbelievable to them. But I would also say that, you know, if you left Europe in the spring, by the time you got to central Canada, they had no money. It was the middle of summer. You had no time to grow food. These people were starving, and they had to beg for food. And there was so much racism. It's hard to explain how much racism there was. But the settlers that came before the Ukrainians were trying to feed them. But they complained to the government. So the government sent a representative to Western Canada to find out what was wrong, and he said, Ukrainians are starving because they're lazy. Now, I've never met a lazy Ukrainian in my life. They were all hardworking, and they would have done anything if they had a chance to grow food, but there wasn't enough time. Growing season in Canada and Western Prairies is 3 months. You got 90 days to grow a garden. If you don't start at the right day, you're never going to get food. And these people were dismissed as lazy. And it was totally a total lie. Perpetrated by the English. The English, of course, were they racist? Of course. You know, they colonized everything with guns and lies and with drugs. The English love to sell addictive drugs. Opium to the Chinese, tobacco, alcohol to the Europeans, and to the North American Indians. They fed them addictive drugs, alcohol, that was wrecking their brains and wrecking the brains of their children. Fetal alcoholism in native population in North America is still dominant. And it's frightening to see how many children still suffer from addictive drugs. And you might think that sugar's not addictive. Yeah, it is addictive, just as addictive as cocaine. And they pushed sugarcane growing. All the slaves were forced to grow sugarcane. And it just perpetuated, slavery. I don't know, Christianity didn't think you had a right to life if you weren't a Christian. In fact, Queen Isabella claimed that the Carib people were cannibals, and this is why it was okay to kill the Carib people, the South American people, and it was okay to enslave them. I was in Bolivia, on a silver mountain where the Spanish forced and killed 3 million people to dig for silver. And it was totally okay with the Christians, totally okay with the Pope. What logic, do religions have? And you want to know how many cannibals there were in the Carib Islands and South America? None. And there's also something I have to tell you. How many witches did the church kill in Europe? Take a wild guess, Richard.
I couldn't guess, but I would say 500,000.
10 million.
Sure.
But that was over 400 years. They killed 10 million. But I just want to say that at any time in those 400 years, there was never 10 million people in Europe. So they had a killing spree. And I'll tell you, guess what? How many witches were there?
Probably none.
None. Researchers went into the past and looked at all the literature on witches. The first book written about witches was written by a woman. It was a fiction. A story, fictitious story. That's all it was. But the next book was written by a man. He expounded on this and made witches seem real. But no, there were no witches. The Catholic Church, the churches, all they wanted to do is get rid of anyone who disagreed with them. That was their only purpose. And if I happened to want my neighbor's land, all I had to do is go to the church and say, oh, I see my neighbor picking mushrooms. She's a witch. Well, let's throw her in a river. If she sinks, no, their favorite was throwing them in a river or a pond. If they sink, they weren't a witch. If they float, they're a witch and they burnt them. Not one witch existed. And anyone that thinks there's witches today or devil worshippers, there's no such thing. They're making believe. They're not real. They're pretending. There's no such thing as a devil. If there was, it's probably in the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church. And there's no such thing as witches. But, okay, everybody loves a good story, but don't go killing people over it.
And speaking about killing people, we were speaking yesterday about Kiev, the story of Kiev.
Ah, yes.
And how it was created, that village.
No, let's go back a little even further. Where does the term slave come from? You know where it came from? Slavic people. The Norwegians would go down the rivers towards the Mediterranean, and they would take Slavs as slaves and force the men to haul their boats over the rapids. And they took all the women they can capture as slaves and sold them to the Turks. That's where the term slave come from. The Norwegians were happy to take slaves and sell them. And those women, they were all branded and taken as captives. And that's the first thing I got to say about Slavs. Now, yes, the first king of Kiev was a Norwegian, okay? A Viking. And he probably marked out the boundaries of Ukraine. Years before Russia even became a country, Russia was just city-states. So he made the first Slavic country in Europe, and he wanted a religion that will keep his people enslaved. Okay? He wanted a religion that would keep them from rebelling.
Yeah, magnetize them.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, to brainwash them into thinking they're part of a greater good. Okay? And that's what he wanted. He wanted a religion which he could use to control the Ukrainians. Okay? It was all about control. So he looked at all the religions in the world at that time. The Muslim religion, the Jewish religion, the Catholic religion. But what he chose, what religion would be the best to enslave his people, keep them captive, he chose the Greek Orthodox religion. So he sent emissaries to Constantinople and said, I want you to send priests to baptize my people. No one came. So he sent new emissaries to Constantinople, and they said, if you don't send priests to baptize these Ukrainians, I will conquer Constantinople. Constantinople, the Pope, sent the priests and mass baptized them. But the original religion of the Ukraine people, they believed that someone flew from somewhere to the Ukraine and taught them to grow wheat. And this is what they worshipped: plants, wheat, eggs. I don't know what else you would want to worship. Yeah, they worship the earth.
Yeah.
I myself, today, I'm a pagan. I worship the sun and the earth. Why?
You're a pagan or you're a Buddhist?
No, I'm a pagan. And I'll tell you why. Because the sun and the earth started life. And I could prove that they're the greatest gods ever existent, because if I took away the sun, you're dead. If I took away the earth, you're dead. If I took away all the imaginary gods, I'd still be alive. So would you. So tell me, what's power? You know, what's power? What's real?
What's power?
No, it's real, and what isn't. Okay? Imaginary gods are not real. And the reason people want to believe in them is because an imaginary god could tell you anything. They can tell you that cars are great, technology is great, you know, science is great. You know, but how great is it if they're just destroying the planet and humans with it? You know, wake up, people. There is no imaginary gods. If you want something to worship, it's the sun and the earth. And the people thousands of years ago knew it. It's just today people don't. Sure. You think you've got such a great ego. The human being is so egotistical, they would never believe that plants and the earth rule. They will never believe it because they have too much ego. I'm sure that people don't even think that, you know, governments and dictators rule. You know, oh, I'm independent. Oh, I can do what I want. No, you can't. No, that's a lie. You know, the dictator can force you to do anything. But in a democracy...
Take a vaccine of COVID.
Yeah. Well, I've been vaccinated 7 times, so I'm quite okay with vaccinations. But I do want to say that in democracies, they call it the unseen hand. They could force you to do anything they want, but they prefer to cajole you to do it. Buy a car, go to work. Buy a house, go to work. You're going to be enslaved to the dollar. You know, that's the unseen hand. The monetary system forces you to work for the machine, for the car, for the tanks, for the nuclear bombs. We're all working for our own destruction.
Speaking about destruction, tell me that story about Lenin and the massacre in Ukraine.
Ah, that was Stalin.
Stalin.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but again, it's the Holodomor is what they called it, I think. But it was before the Second World War, or was it after the Second World War? Hard to say. I think it was before the Second World War.
If it was
before. If Stalin, it was before. So it was something like between 1925 and 1930, Stalin starved 10 million Ukrainians by stealing all the grain and moving it into Russia. They would kill people picking up kernels of grain off the street behind the trucks hauling away their grain. They would just shoot them. Not only that, Stalin killed all the intelligentsia in Ukraine. Everyone that worked for the government was killed. Even if you were a janitor in a government building, you were killed. Because Stalin wanted no competition. He wanted to rule supreme, and the best way to do it was getting rid of Ukrainians. And as soon as he got rid of the Ukrainians, he moved in Russians into Ukraine to take over the best farmland. And that's why today we've got a war in Ukraine. It's because all those Russians were forced to come into Ukraine and overpopulated. So you got a mixture of Russians and Ukrainians living in the same place, which they did quite harmoniously until Putin decided he couldn't stand a successful country on his border. He could not stand a democracy that was successful on his border. And he had to pull the "I'm dictator, I'm going to take it over, and I'm going to kill every Ukrainian I can." Why kill Ukrainians? I don't know. Is he ever going to be happy with killing 1 million Ukrainians? 2 million? 10 million? When's he going to stop? When's the world going to stop him? If we let Russia take over Ukraine, it will be more of the same. It will be genocide. It will be murder. It will be kidnapped kids. It will be rape. And they will steal every penny, every grain kernel they can until Ukraine is totally subjugated. That's his plan. Those Russians are fed so much propaganda and fed racism that they can't see others as being human anymore. All they think is, oh, we're the greatest people on the planet. We're Russians. We can do whatever we want. And, well, Putin definitely wants a new world order. He wants himself to be the leader of the world. He might share power with China. He might share it with Russia, United States, but he wants to be top dog. And hopefully he's dead. Lots of gossip saying that he's dead now. It couldn't happen faster or sooner in my mind. This guy is a curse on the earth. Curse to all people in Europe. And if he had a chance, or would any Russian leader in the future not want to conquer Europe? Of course they would. In the old days, if you had a dispute over who's right and wrong, the biggest club wins. Today, the clubs are nuclear weapons. And I can't think of anything better to get rid of humans with than a nuclear weapon. And why do we have them? They kill people. What do we need them for? Who has the right over human life? No one does. All those nuclear weapons should be destroyed. And maybe use them to kill all the domesticated animals. That won't work. But I don't know.
At least we laugh in the middle of all this tragedy. I also would love to listen again to that story of the Mongols' invasion to just almost to Central Europe, the Mongol culture, and how you perspective the way they stayed in Europe because of the transition of governments in China.
Yes. I think, again, most of my information is coming from National Geographic. And,
Thanks to National Geographic, we all
yes.
more educated.
Yes.
It's a great service. It's a great
So,
service.
if my memory serves me well, the Mongolians conquered the most land ever in human history. Okay, they conquered all the way from China, all the way to Israel, all the way to Vienna. And there in Vienna, Europe was going to stand against them. They lined up all their knights from France, Germany, England, Spain. All the knights were lined up to stop the Mongolian forces. The Mongolians made a smoke screen. They lit fires and made a smoke screen right in front of the knights. All of a sudden, through the smoke screen comes Mongolians on their little ponies, shooting arrows, picking off knights as they rode towards them. They veered to the left and ran back into the smoke screen, and the knights thought they had the Mongolians on the run. So they go charging into the smoke screen where the Mongolians set a trap. They hid behind rocks and logs, and they shot at the horses. The horses reared. The knights went flying. The next horse coming through the smoke smashes into that horse. The next one into that horse, into the next horse. It was a collision of massive horses and iron-clad knights totally destroying themselves. After that, Mongolians could have conquered all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. They could have conquered the entire Asian continent. It was wide open. They're ready for it. There's no one left to stop them. Except someone came riding from China and said, the Khan has died. You have to go back to China to vote for the new Khan. Of course, these grandsons knew if they went back to China, they would most likely be poisoned or killed by competing families looking to become Khan. Because it's very competitive. I mean, the empire of the Khan was enormous. Why wouldn't you risk everything? Anyway, I think 3 or 2 grandsons of the Khan decided not to go back. One went to Persia and ruled Persia until he died. But the grandson who fell back to the Crimea ruled Russia for 400 years.
That dynasty.
Yes, he started a dynasty, and they ruled Russia and Ukraine for 400 years. They had to pay tribute to the Mongolian Khan, or the first Tsar, who knows. But even today, on the Crimea, there are Asian people called the Tartars. These people were the descendants of the Mongolians. And today they are hated by Russians. And they are being forced to fight against their own people. Like Ukrainians and Tartars got along very well. But now, as soon as Russia took over Crimea, forced them to be Russians and send them to fight Ukrainians and die. Minorities from all over Russia are being forced to fight on the front line of the Ukrainian war, and they are being slaughtered by the thousands and thousands and thousands. And Russia doesn't care. As long as their white people aren't getting killed, they're quite happy. And a lot of these minorities are escaping to Ukraine and fighting against the Russians. But Russia has an enormous amount of power over these people. They would say, well, if you don't fight, we're going to imprison your family. We're going to harm your family if you don't fight. And they have no choice. And then they'll offer them, oh, we'll give you $5,000 a month. Well, I tell you, you won't survive a month on the front line of Ukraine. You're never going to get your $5,000. Putin is the greatest propagandist on the planet, and he has infiltrated every corner of the earth with his propaganda. How do we fight propaganda?
With counter-propaganda.
I don't know how, we can end the internet. That's his main source of propaganda.
No, but he's a cousin of the Chinese. He has a good relationship with China. They are aligned.
Yeah, they are aligned, but I'll tell you, China will... If you make allies with China, it's like the game, what's it called? I don't know, but as soon as you can overpower your allies and kill them, you will. It's no different than Hitler. He was allied with Russia. Russians are not taught that they were allies with Germany. They're never taught that. The Russians have totally whitewashed their history. And when Hitler decided that Russia was getting too powerful, he attacked Russia and destroyed in one night 90% of Russia's air force. And the next night, he bombed the other 10% of his air force. This is what allies do. If one gets too powerful, the other one wipes them out. So China will be happy to wipe out the Russians. Anytime that Russia gets too powerful, they will conquer. And I'm positive that if Russia had a chance to conquer China, they will. These dictators don't care about their allies. They care about power. So beware. Your eye might be allied today, but tomorrow you'll be enemies. And I'm sure Russians still hate all ethnics, Chinese, and they still hate the Chinese ethnic people in their own country, because there are a lot of them in the far east of Russia that are half Chinese. They're minorities, and they are being slaughtered in the Ukrainian war for a racist dictator who hates them and is willing to use them. And you would think that the Russians, who have probably lost 300,000 in that war in Ukraine? 300,000 dead people and probably 300,000 wounded. You would think that they would stop killing their own people, but they won't. Why? Because in the Second World War, Russians fought without weapons, with terrible weapons, with outdated weapons against the Germans. 27 million were killed. The Germans killed 27 million Russians, and they just kept coming. Because Russians don't care about human life. And I'm sure the dictator of China doesn't care about human life.
Thank you so much.
No
It
problem.
was a beautiful, beautiful autoscopy, cultural autoscopy. It's the name of this program.
Okay.
And it's a fashion, it's a perspective of view of the electric dreams. That is this program, one of the 7 programs
Oh,
that
thanks.
makes the grill of Consolid Art International.
Well, I hope it helps.
It helps a lot.
And I hope I open some people's minds
Me
to
too.
reality.
Me too, me too.
Okay.
Me too. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome, Richard.